Here I am at President Kimball, his memorial, and I'm gonna hurry or this video will be too long. The next one has my patriarchal blessing year. He died November 5th, 1980, right close to my birth. His name is my brother's name. His last name is close to my mom's maiden. Wooten, O-W-O-O. That year, 1985, he died November 5th. I was turning 5. His wife's name has the AMI pattern, and I know that sounds a little, but I promise you, that's not coincidence. He forms a line with President Nelson into Holy Cross Hospital, a perfect line, a literal perfect line. I'll try to show it even better. The closest 1982, the prophet is right here. Look at this. It just happens to be a prophet's birthday, Monson. And look, the top date, 6 days from Harold B. Lee's birth. Coincidence? Or is that not a coincidence? Is the Lord trying to say something? And the next one has a November 17th symbol. I don't think that's coincidence. That's not normal. Again, you sometimes get lucky. Sometimes you even see 2, 3 down from each other. Right next to that. Also, these form a line, but I'm not going to show it. They form a line through Kimball and then some other stuff, but I'm not going to show it because I want to keep this simple. As I've said, I found, as of recently, 3 November 7th, 1980s. So these are hard to find, whether it's that or a prophet's birthday on a November 1980. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which has my father's birthday. So that's 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 up from Kimball. Look at this. A November 1st, 1980. A November 1st, 1980. Next to it, you have November 7th Apostle, his birth year symbols, and then you have Benson, a month from Benson's birth. Coincidence? And then look, 2 down from the November 1st, 1980. Verda, my mom, Vera. And I don't even know the dates on these. And yes, there's all kinds of confirmations. Look, my patriarchal blessing year with the December 7th, Kieran, Aaron from Kearns, April 12th. Some of this is not as strong, but I'm pointing it out. And there's actually a November 1st, right there. You have my wife's month and year with my brother's birthday, Spencer, and his year, 1977. Across from my dad's birthday, right there. I'm not going to show everything, but I will. I'm skipping all kinds of stuff, actually. I did want to point out there's 2. Look, that's an ordination month and year right after my parents were married. November 27th, 1973, except it's got the Kieran call date. The Kieran call date. I wasn't going to show this. And look at this. My patriarchal blessing, July 2nd, with the 1980 symbols. 1 day after Harold B. Lee or Spencer W. Kimball was ordained president of the church. December 30th, 1973. But I wasn't going to show that. And the part of my point is there's stuff everywhere I don't believe is coincidence, but I got to skip it. I just saw another one. I want to keep it to the things that I think. And yeah, there's a couple lines into the prophet. Kimball. So here is the other, which is not normal. November 12th, 1980. you get the ordination going into it, April 12th, which is the one my mom is linked to, April 12th, 1951. Coincidence? If that is a coincidence, then why 1-2 down is Harold B. Lee's very ordination day? A prophet's ordination, the most important dates of all. More important even in a sense than the first vision. It represents the keys, the ordinances, the covenants, the authority, our salvation, which can only come through the priesthood. Also, look, if you switch the 8 and the 0, you get a May 1980 Mount St. Helens. Look, another July 7th. He's confirming it. It defies the odds. Right next to the November 1980. I'm going to go back down and my health. I can't breathe good. I can't breathe out my nose. Have stomach. So here is the only Aaron closest to Nelson, closest to Kimball, listed as a child. And yes, there's confirmations around this. I don't have time, or it will be too long. I'm going to show why that Aaron is not a coincidence. But first, I'm going to go back to Kimball's row and go, see, stay in this row and go into Nelson's plot. See? Across the street. Stay in Kimball's row. There is 5 Veras in this massive, massive plot. One is at the other end. The other one is on the other side of that stone, a little farther. It has a November 7th, my mom's name with a November 7th. The other 3 are in this row, Kimball's row, but close to Nelson. Watch. In 1980, about a month from my birth, and the Vera. Coincidence? Watch. And I'm skipping things, or this video will be too long. Okay, so here's a look. May, Mount St. Helens. May 1980, look, Lee and Benson's birth year. Coincidence? Look, a prophet's birthday, Joseph F. Smith, 6 days after I was born. Coincidence? Is that a coincidence? Is it a coincidence? Look, this is the only Dennis. And look, it has a Russell, as if kind of fitting because we're close to Russell M. Nelson, but that could be coincidence. As my brother's name Keith, my father. This is the, let me see, one. No, sorry. There's one other Dennis way over there in the same plot. There's one other. And like I said, there was 5 Veras. One is close to that Dennis. The other one's almost 1/3 over here. And then the other 3 are in this row. Coincidence? If that's a coincidence, the November 13th, 1980, the Dennis, one of only 2, look how close we are to President Nelson. Then why is the only July 2004, 8 days after I got my blessing, right here? Russell. About a month after an ordination, the top date. Why? This is President Kimball's row, which had the November 1st, 1980. And by the way, this forms, I wasn't going to show this, dang it. Look, my patriarchal blessing and Kimball's birth year. Look, the next 1980, a prophet's birthday, President Kimball. They form a line. Now, if you're going through the center of those, they would basically go in between these. See how the Lord's not done? He's going to fill that in. If I angled it kind of 1/3, I can hit this, or maybe even that. But remember I said 3 of the Veras are in this row. 3. Look at this. Look. By the way, sorry, I meant there's 2 July 2004s. I'm absolutely positive about that. Absolutely positive. I have searched this whole plot. Literally. I should just, after this video, I should just demonstrate some of that. But look at this. Vera. With my patriarchal blessing month and year, 6 days after Maxwell's death. And look, it has the 2. Now, why maybe did the Lord use a 27? You get Joseph Smith's death date, whom my patriarchal blessing talks about in the successive line. Look, the next one, Vera with Joseph Smith's death date again, and then Dallin Achok's birthday. Two down from the last Vera, look, my mom's birthday. Look at that. And it matches the ordination of Hinckley, March 12th, 1995, and my wife's, April 4th. Here's why I don't think that's coincidence. My brother's birth month and year, look. They form a line, those two, look. The very day my wife was born, April 4th, 1977. And it has 3 Novembers. And I've already shown way more than I wanted to. Here's a November 22nd. Okay, I will show, I'm gonna make a point. So remember the Aaron that I pointed out in Kimball's plot? He's in this row. And in fact, if I'm wrong, I'll even double check that, because that's a new discovery for me. Not the Aaron, but linking it to this. Look, the prophet's father, a November 7th pattern with, and he's got, well, I shouldn't share too much. There's derivatives. There's a prophet's birthday right there. Marion, Aaron MI, the November 7th pattern, my parents' anniversary date. Watch. I have to show this. I'm so tempted. There's stuff everywhere. July 2nd, my patriarchal blessing, Clausen, the people that these guys came from. He's a November 7th, Clausen. On President Monson's birth year. Notice none of the other years are prophets' birth years. Look at that. I have to show this. I got my patriarchal blessing in Arizona. Look, it goes through a Keith, my brother's name. I lived outside the gates of the Mesa Temple. Look at this. Outside the heavenly gate. See that? Outside the heavenly gate. The July 2nd, it's got my brother's name on it. It forms a perfect line. Look. Mesa Temple. I lived across the street from there when I got my patriarchal blessing. I'm so tempted to show more. It's shocking. The divine alignment into the prophet that I can't show, or this video will be way too long. Oh. Jeez. And the next stone to the prophet is his sister. Her middle name is Faye. It's not on here. You can go Google it. They took it out so that the Nelson and the Ogard could be included. Her middle name is my mom's middle name, right next to the November 7th pattern in the Marion. But look at this. My parents sealed on a November 27th. Watch. You go up, same row. I get on this side of it. And I'm tempted to show things. I'm not going to. This video will be too long. And the Vera and the November 7th form a line into Nelson that's shocking with like in October, close to my dad's. But anyways, go up here. Same row as Nelson's father, Nelson's father with his November 27th. Look at this. My parents sealed November 27th, 1973. He's making an analogy to the prophet's father, the Marion Aaron MI, with the November 27th. That's not coincidence. Same row. There's none other in this plot. I'll guarantee you that. I'll bet there's none in that plot. There's no way. Why is this? Look, a November prophet right next to it. No. Why November prophet right there? Could be coincidence. I'm not going to go over all that. So here it is. Nelson's father row. He has the November 27th, same row as the November 27th, 1970. Why in the world is it in the same row as the Aaron listed as a child? The only Aaron. Same row, but close to Kimball and in Kimball's plot. Literally. There's no way. There's no way. So I'm gonna go back to the Verda in Kimball's row and I'm gonna show you something. That's not coincidence. The prophet's father, my parents, same row. The Aaron listed as a child, that represents my parents and me, and more even. Here's the Verda. Look, if you go through the Verda, through the November 27th, 1973, look at what it hits. November 1980, with a November 6 going diagonal. Look, you keep going, hits the corner of this. Look, there's no way. There's no way. And in fact, while I'm at it, I could do this. In fact, the strongest line, I'm not even going to show it. It will take too long. It will take too long. So actually, let me see here. The Verda, look, there's a Rivera, November 8th. Here it is. Verda. That goes through this 1980. May. It's a May. A Christofferson. The Lord just elevated that name. Coincidence? Boom. Look into my father's birthday with Nelson's birth year. But that's not the line. I was confused. Here's the line. The other line, it goes through Christofferson, the May 1980. And then it hits this November 7th. It goes into Nelson. Let me prove that real fast. Look, there's that flat one. It's perfect. Coincidence? So, kind of hits the corner of this. You have November 7th, Apostle, his month and year represented. And then look what it hits next. My father, born October 9th, 1951. That's harder to get than a Dennis. That's not coincidence. That's not coincidence. Oh, it hits a November prophet with a November 17th going diagonal. And then it hits right in here. And there's another line, which I think is the most shocking of all. November 7th goes through the prophet, crosses the street. It hits a 1980 that's in Kimball's row, who's up there, but the 1980's in Kimball's row. And the November 7th that it starts at the top, is in the same row as the prophet Harold B. Lee. You got to go down 2 plots to Harold B. Lee. There's no way. There's simply no way. And it hits this September 12th, my mom's birthday, with a prophet's birthday right there, June 1st. And then it comes down, it hits this November 7th through the prophet. But I'm not going to show that. The reason why is it will take too long. My feet are hurting. There's no way that these are a coincidence. I will try to show one last thing here. For anyone who listens and who's getting to know me in the event that the Lord has connected my videos to someone important and to the right person, that's both nostrils. I can't breathe. It magnifies my anxiety, especially when I'm doing tasks like this, because I have to largely breathe out of my mouth. And then my vertigo, my plantar fasciitis, my all kinds of stuff, and my stomach pain, which leaves me grunting a lot. Oh, hey, look at this. Look at what I forgot. My mom's birthday. Kitty corner. Look at that. Isn't the November 1st, 1980 in Kimball's Row. I forgot about that. There's literally no way. And is that not one of the most important symbols to my birth? Her? Right there at Holy Cross, which Kimball and Nelson form a perfect line into this, basically the center of it. And then the Verda, 2 down. Look at that, same row. Up a little, a November prophet. Oh, that's interesting. A November prophet on Kimball's birth year, the very prophet whose row this is. Is that a coincidence? Because he surely, clearly tied me in here. I would have to probably have more, like a prophet right there. McKay. Here's a Benson. And then the last one ends with a prophet on a prophet's birth year. Brigham Young's on Hunter's. Now notice, none of the other years are prophet's birth years. Well, the 1916, well, just to prove my point. 1937, no. 1912, no. 1901, no. Even though, look, that's an ordination month and year. I'll have to study this a little more later. Huh. Now look at this. There's something here. Look, empty spot, empty spots, empty spots, empty spots. The Lord's not done here. Look at how rare this is. 10 days from Hunter's birth. Look at the other one. 16 days from Hinckley's. This is not normal. One of them, you almost get a July 2nd, 2004 derivative. You're just missing one of the O's. My patriarchal blessing. I don't know if I'd count that. It's a Smith, Douglas. I don't know the dates on those. August, September, let's see. Okay. 1, 2, 3, my mom's birthday. This is preliminary, and I have looked at this before. I remember some of this, but not as thoroughly as the other stuff. And in fact, look, the next one has my grandfather's pattern, who was born October 7th, 1914, except it has the Chiron call day. Aaron from Kearns, Chiron. That may not. There's nothing. And look, my mom's birth year and sailing gear directly across from her birthday. That strengthens that. Oh, okay. See, this is what I tried to avoid, or I knew this video would be too long.